Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap.
Welcome back, everyone, to the 817 podcast. I'm glad to be back in town after a couple of weeks and ready to dive back into everything that's been going on here in the fort while I was gone.
How's being out of the state of Texas and being out and coming back? What's your feels?
It was hot. Okay, it was hotter in Florida than it was here. Like, it was miserably humid. And so coming back here and it's like we're getting into fall weather.
It has
had me really excited looking at the radar to get back into like colors changing and all of that. So I'm happy to be back. We had a crazy we had a wedding to come back to last night, and our flight on Friday night got canceled, and the only way for us to get back in time for the wedding was to drive.
Whoa.
So we they couldn't book us on a new flight until Sunday, and so we rented a car and hit 16 hours back to Fort Worth.
Wow.
So yeah,
these people must have been really important to you, because I would have been like, hey, send us the registry.
Yeah.
I'll get you something a little nicer.
So I am glad to be here and not on the road anymore.
Now, the Friday was just weather?
They like shut down. Our plane was coming in from Fort Lauderdale, and they had to shut down Fort Lauderdale airport completely. So they like couldn't get a plane to us. Yeah, lots of fun.
Well, you went to a state that's also not, doing too hot in the national news.
Yeah.
So kind of stayed on theme.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and dive in. So I think what today's really about is like little nuggets and just stuff. And then also, we've missed Jimmy's perspective. And so hopefully he can get hot on a couple of these stories and bring it for us. Also, next week, we're going to have we already recorded it actually, and it was pretty solid. We're going to have two guys to talk about Global Entrepreneurship Week, which, if you don't know, Fort Worth actually runs the largest global entrepreneurship week in the country, with over 90 events all across the city, outside guests doing workshops. Jimmy and I are looking at doing some stuff as well, but we talked to Marco Johnson with Sparkyard and Walker Lootringer, who runs Accelerate DFW, two entrepreneurship guys who are blunt and has a lot of data around how Fort Worth is not innovative and not meeting the moment to be business friendly. So we dive with them for like a good hour of just talking about that. So that will be posted next Monday. But today we're going to just talk about like things that I think like philosophically or like perspectives are funny, little nuggets that we have. And so we're going to start with actually Judge Glen Whitley.
Good old Judge Glen Whitley was speaking to a crowd this week and just urging people to get vaccinated. Really unfiltered. Just, come on, guys. Like, we can't make this political anymore. Like, Trump's got his shots. Get your shots. It's time that we stop dying, which Tarrant County has been like the worst county in Texas for cases for a solid like month and a half now. And we've just got low vaccination rates. And so it was refreshing to hear the veil pulled off a little bit and hear him talking to a crowd that's probably a more captive audience for him, and hopefully have them hear this message of get out there and get your shots.
Yeah, I'm going to read the quote, but a part of me really wanted you to read it in your Glen Whitley voice, but I don't know if you remember that one anymore. But so kind of context, the audience was 123. He told the audience that 123 people has died from the coronavirus. 89% were not fully vaccinated. So here's the quote. He said, "Folks, get the vaccination. Let's get this thing over with. Let's quit making it political. Hell, Trump was right there. He got his vaccination." Now, he kind of continues to go on and kind of goes with the idea of cell phones and calling cell phones a blessing and a curse. He says, they, meaning the cell phone, has made all of us experts about a lot of stuff that we don't know nothing about. And he just kind of says, so please put the politics aside, get the vaccine, let's go on with our lives and move on to more important things as we go forward. He also kind of just really hits like, hey, I listen to my doctor, who's the actual expert. So yeah, I mean, when I guess you're not running for your position anymore, you don't have to woo people to vote for you. It's just so amazing how logically thoughtful and centered a lot of Texas Republicans can get when they're not running for something.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing to hear what people like him actually think, versus what they project when they're trying to win a vote. And maybe that's probably a good a good pro in favor of term limits in general. And actually, I feel like we would get a lot more truthfulness out of people if they weren't constantly fighting for their jobs. So, like Glenn Whitley said, get your shot. But that was just a little thing that we wanted to highlight, where when you're not running for office anymore, we actually get to hear what you think.
Yeah, and I mean, there was some parts here that he also hit on financially where I feel like he's stuck conservative on, or like, I think Fort Worth prides itself on being having the lowest combined tax rate of the state's 6 largest counties. Like, we see that as a good thing. So he kind of talks about that. He also talked about how the county received $408 million of the American Rescue Plan, which we've spent very little of that throughout all of this. And so he talked about how this funds will last for decades. And the 4 kind of areas they talked about using those funds is improving public health, preparing for the future, revitalizing the economy, and strengthening the community. And there will be also, he mentioned that there will be 5 public meetings through October to gauge the public's opinions on redistricting. So, still a little conservative on the budget stuff, which we know is something we all the Fort Worthians pride themselves on.
Yeah. Well, another thing that conservatives love talking about is crime. And so we're gonna talk about some crime, but in a positive way. Violent crime is down 22% in Fort Worth's Las Vegas Trail. That's a super positive thing just based on the headline. But Las Vegas Trail is generally an area that if you head over there, you're going to see a lot of Fort Worth PD cars just parked, hanging out, waiting for something to happen. But after a 2017 series by the Fort Worth Star-Telegram highlighted the area's problems with gun violence, drug abuse, and child sexual exploitation, it really became a focus of Fort Worth PD and members of the city council to try and turn this around. So, Willie Rankin started as the executive director of the nonprofit LVT Rise in August of 2019, with the goal of reducing crime by 15% in 3 years after he started. The group started holding community meetings and surveying residents to learn why this is happening here, what was causing the high crime rate. With that survey, they were able to work with the Fort Worth PD to come together and figure out ways to actually dive in and fix a lot of these issues. And altogether, the efforts that they've been putting forth have worked. The number of violent crimes this year have fallen from 457 during the first 9 months of 2019 to 371 this year. So that's the 22% decrease, and it clearly shows that what they're focusing on it is working. And so I wonder how we can take this model and implement it in other neighborhoods around the city. One thing the article mentions is how this only happens based on community trust with the Fort Worth PD. And that's something that new chief Neil Noakes has talked about. And I think that's a pretty general consensus that crime doesn't get better if the people in the community don't trust the people being paid to protect them. So we now have an example of something that works. How do we spread that across the city and go into other neighborhoods that are high crime areas and figure out how to provide for their needs, build trust with the police force, and actually make change happen?
Yeah, and kind of note though, the initiative was also kind of led by Dr. Brian Bird. This was a conversation after the 2017 series by the Star-Telegram. I know a lot of this also had a lot of, church support. I know they built a Boys and Girls Club or something like that, a community area throughout this time. And I know even when he was running for mayor, this kind of movement and investment he made in this area was a big part of his platform as well. And then now with Michael Crane being District 3, I actually liked what Michael Crane said here. Saying that we need to encourage more home ownership on Las Vegas Trail, help build generational wealth. Las Vegas Trail shouldn't be where people end up. It should be where people want to live. I know last week we talked about how new townhomes were being built in Las Vegas Trail area. Not sure how. So then I start thinking about, does a lot of this starting to change is because is it more gentrified than it was 2017? These are just ideas in my head, and then also I think the expensive townhomes or houses that were showing up. I wonder if this is are they cleaning it up so then they can make people more comfortable, more white people feel comfortable by nice houses over there now? I don't know. So I'm just trying to see how it's going to pan out long term for this good news.
Yeah, and I agree with you on what City Councilor Michael Crane said, and then also the next steps being a plan to provide better medical services, better housing, better grocery store access to the area. All of these things just providing the ability of the people who live there to have the social safety nets they need to not need to rely on crime or something else to provide for themselves or feel like they can provide for themselves. So obviously this is generally a very positive thing and a win for that community. But I do think that's a good thought of is this because other neighborhoods in that area don't have room to grow anymore, and so they need to grow into Las Vegas Trail and Como, and it becomes more gentrified? Or what can we do to make sure that doesn't happen, and that the people who live there aren't just going to get pushed somewhere else that then has a lot of these similar issues, but we're actually building and raising up the community there so that they can thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think a lot of things we talked about last episode around is this things so gentrification can start moving in, or is this things to stabilize? Are things we guess we'll just simply see? So going on to the third short story, we're going to talk about, it was the Evans renovations going on, and that side that's going to start in Q3 of 2022. And I know that the kicker here is I felt like, after that episode, I ranted a lot about general, impact about large corporations getting into buying homes and making it hard for families to get a home. And so I know a lot of that was spent with this. And so I know there's been a lot of intentionality in Fort Worth as a whole has been very positive about what's happening in the Evans Plaza. But, I know recently in the Star Telegram, there was talks about which grocery store may be coming to the Fort Worth South Side. As we talked about last week, this is a 7.5 acre multi-use project from Dallas-based developer Hoke Global. Chris Nettles talked about a grocery store will, that's not going to like bring gentrification. So like not a Whole Foods, not a Trader Joe's. So we'll see. But there's something in this that hits to me that made me feel like what I talked about is this just the start of gentrification in Evans area? Is this the start? And I feel like when this dropped in the Fort Worth Business Press last week, it was about celebrating, man, we're finally making change. It's public, private, coming together. And even I have some friends and colleagues who worked on the project. And so I felt, a little bit of like, I don't want to be that guy, but I feel like the concerns of, is this just the start of gentrification on the other side of I-35? And here's the part that I thought like made me concerned. It said that Hoke Global has committed to offer 10% of units to people who earn at or less than 80% of the annual Fort Worth Arlington median income. For a single person household, 80% of the median income is $45,300. At 60%, it's $33,950. So just to give you context, in the 76104 area where people live in Evans Plaza, the median household income for 76104 was $31,450. So that means the family in the middle, going back to basic math, elementary, could not afford to live in that 10%. So that means pretty much the majority of people who live there can't afford to live in these new places. So 90% of these new availability would have to come to people who can afford to live there who currently don't live there. And that is the start of gentrification.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point. And that's something that I hadn't noticed in the article until you brought it up. Are we building homes and living situations in neighborhoods that fit the needs of the people living there? And the answer to that is obviously no in this situation. Given that, okay, I guess the other side is that's the units that are quote unquote affordable housing. Yeah. We don't know how much the rest of the units are going to cost. So maybe they come in at a figure that is accessible to people in that area. But when you're only setting aside a certain number of units that meet the accessibility of the community there, you're setting yourself up for failure as far as, like, if we see gentrification on, like, a scope and say, like, yes, is something is being gentrified as a failure, then yes, you're setting yourself up for failure. I do think there's something to be said for the city council member for our district being, like, taking responsibility for this and having a really close eye on it. And I think that's, like, whether it continues to be Nettles for years to come or whoever else gets elected, like, they have to have a laser focus on making sure that area does not become gentrified, because it's a prime suspect for where for community expansion, you know?
100%.
And so I think that's super important. My other thing that sucks with this is like, if we're not breaking ground until Q3 2022, like, when's this grocery store going to open? 2024? You know, like, we're 3 years away, 2 to 3 years away from having a quality grocery store in the community when we know it's an issue, and we've known it's an issue since like before 2020, but then really got highlighted in 2020. Yeah. So there's got to be a better short-term solution to providing access to quality groceries than waiting for a potential grocery store to potentially move into this spot 3 years from now.
Yeah, and the other part that I felt is like I was wanting to go back. I was trying to. I mean, we do this for fun on Sunday. We are not professionals, experts, or people who do this because we do this for a living. This is a side passion project. But I was trying to find things if you could go back and look at similar language to like what happened to Southside.
Yeah.
Like, could you see something like, is this just a replay of history where, hey, we're doing these little things where now we're putting in these homes, and then out of nowhere, boom, near Southside shows up, and it's like, this is it. Like, even when you look at Zillow, I mean, like, every millennial addicted to Zillow, you're looking at, if you look at that area, there's some new homes being built.
Yeah.
About 1,600 square feet. Mm-hmm. So, small little bungalows, but they're looking sleek, and they're starting at $240, $250. Yeah. That to me looks like, hey, if I'm a person who's affording apartments on Southside, and now I want to try to maybe move to a home, but I love my area.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to start trickling over to the other side of 35, and now there it goes.
Yeah. And I feel like that's something that Hemphill No Se Vende caught on to, was like,
yeah,
I know what you're saying here, and the language is the same as what was said when you told us a decade ago that we were going to start doing these things around Magnolia and the near South Side.
Yeah.
And they stood up and fought it. And so I feel like there are definitely going to be similarities, and it's going to take the city councilor, people in the neighborhood association, and members of that community standing up and saying, yes, like, we need these things. We need access to healthcare. We need access to quality produce and good food. But that doesn't mean that we need to build apartments that are catered to an audience that doesn't live here.
Yeah, and then you're going to have... But then what's going to happen is... because the last episode I talked about how 1 of every 4 renter spends half of their income on paying their rent.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen is that even though no one could afford to live there, everyone's going to try to live there.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're just going to build more balls and chains connected to people's ankles and wrists.
Yeah.
And inability to create wealth. Like, that's another kicker. It's like, that's going to be the thing too. It's, and that's to me the whole battle of the renting game and how expensive it is to rent.
Yeah.
And also just how expensive it is to do anything these days. It's really difficult. I mean, and it's hard. I don't know what the answer is. I feel like I usually like to be solution forward. But I just feel like it goes back to, like, the real change comes from the average American sacrificing.
Yeah.
And we just don't like to sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, it's something that I'm sure we'll be talking plenty about over the, coming months and year building up towards when we break ground on that.
Love it. Well, let's go to the big story. Big story is going to be about the redistricting. We're also going to talk about that. I mean, Jimmy has some stuff on the school board stuff as well, and also the Texas Senate seat. So You want to go ahead and read us out?
Yeah, so Fort Worth is the only major Texas city to not have a resident among the 31 members of the Texas Senate. Redistricting is happening this year, and guess what? Once again, Fort Worth is going to be left out of the Senate. So senators voted 20-11 on Monday to approve their new district map. Most of Fort Worth is currently in Senate District 10, which is represented by Burleson Democrat Beverly Powell. Under the new map, most of the city is going to shift into North Richland Hills, Kelly Hancock's district, which seems like an attempt to dilute the growing diversity of Fort Worth. Reading about this, it kind of felt like, like Fort Worth has had this little brother mantra for a long time in relation to Dallas, but also in relation to the other big cities in Texas. And, Fort Worth is hitting puberty. It's starting to grow up. It's gaining some of its muscles. And the state has to figure out how to keep Fort Worth reminded that it's still little brother. And this kind of feels like that we're now another decade away from Fort Worth having a resident in the Texas Senate. And so, what are the implications of that? Like, technically, we're still represented, right? Like, we have somebody that we vote for who's in there. But when you live in North Richland Hills, or you live in Burleson, do you truly know and understand the needs of people that live in Fort Worth? Truthfully, we, read news about Arlington all the time, and even Haltom City, but, I don't understand what it means to live there and what the needs of those people are. From suburb to suburb, even Plano to Frisco to Allen to McKinney, all of them have different priorities and different needs, and you can't truly grasp and represent that well without living there. And so it just kind of feels like another Fort Worth. We're going to make sure that you understand that you're still little brother, even though you're growing and growing more diverse. We need to make sure that you don't have a seat at the table yet.
Yeah, no, I think it's, I think about, man, it's funny just doing the interview already with Marco and Walker on the state of Fort Worth in innovation, entrepreneurship, and business. They provide so much crazy data on how we should be afraid of Frisco and the amount of businesses are being started there. It is just, it's crazy data. But so I don't want to give that episode away too much. It just seems like what these lines do is Fort Worth is the small town's big city. And so what I mean is people from small towns love living in small towns, but they love going to the city, for the weekend, right? They love to go to the city for the holidays, maybe get some new clothes or whatever. So it's Texas wants Fort Worth to be rural town city.
Yeah.
That you come, hey, we're going to go hang out. Where I would argue is more I think about Fredericksburg and Grapevine, Texas, those areas are what I think people seek, where small town comes to big city to a city to just kind of shop and kind of eat and have a slow paced vibe, but away from more city life. And it just seems like that's what these lines are wanting Fort Worth to stay. It's don't actually become a big city so that we can still enjoy you from West Texas.
Yeah. Well, and some good data in this article from the Fort Worth Report is Senate District 10, nearly a decade ago, was 47.6% white. And that's what the Fort Worth district essentially is. Now that same district is 39.5% white.
Mm-hmm.
The new District 10 is 49% white. And so what this really is a chance to dilute the minority vote, which we know that Fort Worth is a majority minority city. This is making sure that the white vote stands tall and proud still. And so, I mean, you know, we call it how we see it. Like, this is obviously an attempt to make sure that POC voices aren't being heard and represented the way that they need to and should be.
Yeah. What is your take on, I know it's also, do you see any impacts on the school board stuff? I know a new post in the Fort Worth Report also talked about the school board redistricting. We don't feel like those lines will be necessarily impacted by all of this?
Yeah, not as much. And so Fort Worth ISD every 10 years also does redistricting. 2011, there was a major shift in the way that the school board was run. This won't be as big, but they are going to move towards actually having technology draw these maps instead of just people hand drawing them. Like, wow, we're in 2021. Like, we're finally going to have a computer do this work for us. But it will be interesting to see where the chips fall as far as how some of these districts change a little bit. As the city has changed so much in the last 10 years. One thing that I think is interesting, obviously Fort Worth has grown, but the 2020 census pegged Fort Worth ISD's population at 513,000, which is up about 70,000 people, or no, up about 50,000 people from 2010. Yet we still just continue to see articles about how enrollment in Fort Worth ISD is dropping, and like, what do we make of that? So it continues to be an interesting conversation of how is this city growing and fewer people are going to school in the public school systems. And I mean, that's something that redistricting could help solve. If people can see someone who looks like them and they know represents them fighting for their kids on the school board, maybe that makes them more apt to send their kids to school in this district, or just like seeing a functional like school board trying to push the district forward. I don't know. It continues to be the conversation of why is Fort Worth growing and why is nobody going to school here? Yeah. And like why is funding from Fort Worth residents being spread out to these other school districts?
Yeah. I mean, I'd be interested to know what's the actual enrollment across these 10 years. You know, it said population grew 10%, but how much did enrollment grow or decreased in that same time? And it seems like, you know, again, I'm thinking about the interview that I had earlier with Marco and Walker, but we even dive into like how much more is Fort Worth more of a 513,000 person city?
Yes.
That's actual Fort Worth. Like, is that actually just like the true city size?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, but then you add on all this other stuff. So it's also kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting to think about, like, they're talking about how, in this article, about how there's been growth in western and southwestern areas of Fort Worth ISD. Like, yes, there's been population growth there. Is there Fort Worth ISD school enrollment growth there? Like, should we be basing districts off of gross population or actual enrollment in schools? You know? Yeah. Like, why are we catering to the needs of people not using the product? That if you're a business, that doesn't make sense. Why are you creating a product that people don't want to use? So what could it look like for us to actually base redistricting on the population using Fort Worth ISD versus continuing to cater to the needs of people that are sending their kids to private school or whatever other alternative they're choosing.
Yeah. So I guess we'll continue to see as the redistricting process continues. Unfortunately, it seems like a lot of people are like, not a lot of changes to the recommendations will be happening throughout the process. So it's very interesting, and I think what we talked about last pod with the New York Times article and how much of the stronghold this provides less purple districts and the possibility of flipping districts.
Yeah.
It really provides a lot of confirmation for what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All righty, the wins and losses.
I will start with my loss, and that is that the former head of the water district is getting his payday.
Oh, you're giving me the Timberview High School.
Oh, okay. Well,
no. No, that's fine. We can just
they can be
they're
co-losses this week. So the water board voted to settle former GM's threatened lawsuit by giving him his payday of where'd the number go?
$257,000
instead
total.
instead of $300,000. Like, oh, good job! Like, you saved us $50,000. This has been an ongoing saga that Jessica Priest has been doing a great job of unearthing the total and utter dysfunction of the Tarrant County Water Board. But this guy's walking out, having originally attempted to claim like $300,000 to $350,000 in paid leave that he hadn't taken. And we were, gonna write that check to him with no questions asked. But thanks to a lot of the investigative reporting done by the team at the Fort Worth Report, a lot of this came to light. And now he only gets $250,000.
Yeah. Poor guy.
Yeah, like how do I get into these like grifter positions? Like, if somebody could let me know how I run an organization terribly and then walk away with a $250,000 check, my DMs are open.
Yeah, and what's crazy, it seemed like he was being the like aggressor in the sense of, oh, city, you want to play with me? I'll sue your ass.
Yeah,
and it's like,
yeah.
The city's like, no, don't do that. And so it's like, it seems like he was leading in the charge. Like, he was like, oh, this is a ageism thing. And like, I was like, man, but this to me shows like, how like, I think white constituents, a white male constituent knows how to use the law. Where a bunch of black and brown people in this same situation would have no idea how to press.
Yeah.
Like, I would have no idea how to press. He pressed his game, and he knew what he was doing. Like, this shows when you know how to make the laws work for you. And I feel like this is a classic white-collar crime success because of that skill set.
Right. And so, like, long-term, because he's pressing, this probably saves the district money. Like, who knows how much they were going to be paying lawyers and whatnot to handle this. But it's just crazy. Like, it's insane that we live in a place where, because you are in a position of wealth and privilege, you have the ability to essentially grift ex-employers into more wealth and privilege.
Yeah. So definitely the loss, and we kind of highlighted the other losses. Obviously, it's been on the top of the news, and usually what we try to do in the 817 pod is stay away from crime, shootings, and things like that. But I know the Timberwolf High shooting was a big thing, so we're just saying that's a loss, especially October being anti-bullying month. And also just this being in Mansfield ISD, We know people who had kids there, and just like the overall anxiety I can't imagine of parents, and just all that's going on there is really unfortunate. I mean, for teachers, the whole thing was just a big L. We'll see how, I guess, the rest of it pans out. I don't know if this is going to go long. I don't know what would make this political or go long. It was just a bad situation. Jimmy, got anything?
Guns suck. Texas gun laws suck.
Yeah.
And like, there's no justification for bringing a gun into schools.
Yeah.
And also, schools should have the resources to actually combat bullying and bullying cases that are brought to their attention. You know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. It's not an either or thing. Like, both things suck. There's no justification for bringing a gun to school. There's also no reason that in 2021 kids should have to worry, or kids should be able to feel safe. And part of that is, if you're getting bullied in school and you tell somebody about it, something should be done.
Yeah.
And like, you shouldn't feel like you have to bring a gun to school to protect yourself from bullies.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot around. I know there's talks about a gun issue as a whole in these schools. And so we'll see what comes from it. You know, I just think about what was powerful in the sense of, is like, it seemed like a lot of the messaging was around, you know, thank God that we prep for stuff like this. And because we prep for this, we had a plan in place and everyone knew what to do. And kids said, hey, you know, we've been through drills. And I just think that's unfortunate. I mean,
Yeah.
like, I think if you're a parent and you're talking to your 14-year-old about, hey, you know, it's no longer just it's not a fire drill, it's active shooter drill. It looks like it made peace here. No one died here. It could have been maybe a lot worse. So,
Yeah.
it's just,
Well, and that's like, we prep for the outcome, not for the input, right? Like, we don't do anything to prevent school shootings from happening. We do things to prepare kids for when they happen. And that's just illustrative of the way that the country looks at really every issue, is we're going to prep for the outcome, not the input.
yeah.
And so that is really sad that I didn't have to do school shooting drills.
Yeah.
But that's where we are now.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to finish off with some wins. Wins we want to go with, I mean, basically we could do the wins too, because they're just basically highlighting events happening, things going on. So get out for Tay Day. I don't know if I think I don't have the article right in front of me, but Tatiana Jefferson, we had an event downtown. Over 1,000 people showed up and paraded around downtown celebrating her, and I think that was it's been 2 years, and so I think that was a win, just to seeing the community active and involved with that. And I think especially as trial comes up and things start kicking in, I'm sure just like redistricting, this is, you know, just like gentrification in Fort Worth, this is going to be a topic you and I have people come on about and talk about a lot for the next year.
Yeah, and I really hope for her family that this was a day of like levity and fun. You know, like, it's not, when the trial starts, it's not going to be fun for anyone. Like,
Yeah.
and so I just really hope that for them, seeing all the support that they have in the community, I really hope that it was just like an easy day of celebrating her and getting to see the support that they have behind them.
Yeah.
And then our other win is that the big duck is finally coming. October 30th, all you mother duckers out there, get out to see the world's largest rubber duck in Trinity Park. It was postponed because all of the mother duckers in Tarrant County that don't want to get vaccinated. But it's coming October 30th. And I feel like that's just going to be a fun community event.
Yeah, Halloween. That's a Halloween day.
Yeah,
right?
day before Halloween.
Yeah, day before. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm sure that there's going to be a ton of people out there. Like, really great chance to see people from all across the city coming together for just like a fun, silly event.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it was like a guy from Fort Worth's idea, which is cool. I just thought this was like a national thing. And
yeah, I just thought it was a random duck.
Yeah, but no, it's like a Fort Worth guy's like, hey, let's spread some kindness. And
yeah,
he like Googled what ideas and then found this big duck. And
yeah,
like, let's do this. And it's a rubber duck, so it's like, you know, old school looking rubber duck to be floating down the Trinity.
Yeah, maybe he needs to turn it into a boat. You know, like, what if you could board the duck?
Get some premium seats.
Yeah. Ride the world's largest rubber duck.
Yeah. So, cool to see just events coming back and things, just things going on like that. So, Jimmy, good to have you back in the pod. It was good. We have a lot of important stuff to talk about as Q4 and the end of the year comes up. Man, I think about, just thinking about the trial coming up for Dean and just how does our mayor navigate something like that. You know, that's going to be, we'll see how that works.
Yeah, it was good to be back. I mean, yeah, the next couple months, like, we've got a bond election November 2nd that we'll really dive into in the coming couple weeks. We've got that.
Global
Entrepreneurship Week. Yeah, there's a lot happening. So I'm excited for the rest of the year, Q4 here.
Yeah, and what's funny is, like, you think me and Jimmy are grumpy about Fort Worth. Wait till you hear these two guys next week. They're just like, we're on the back end. So it's really fun. It was a really fun interview, and it's going to be out next Monday, and it's just going to be about the state of Fort Worth and our innovation development, if you would, and the research around how far behind we are. And then also it's going into Global Entrepreneurship Week in November. Yeah, cool stuff, people.
Yeah, thanks for listening, and tune in next week.